What's up guys, it's Yes I Am James back here once again with another video. First off, apologies for the poor audio quality. Haven't been able to sort it out quite yet, but I have had a couple of users who have been generous enough to offer some assistance, so that should be sorted out relatively soon. With that being said then, let's get on with today's video. I'm going to be responding to Venomfangx's video where he basically claims that atheism is a religion, and of course I quite strongly disagree. I've heard this claim many times from theists, but I've never actually got round to making a video debunking this myself, and I thought that this would be a perfect opportunity. So for Venomfangx, I have had to cut down a few bits from your video because it was quite long. So if you feel that I cut out bits of the video which are very important, don't just accuse me of strawmanning you. It's not intentional. I've just had to reduce the video a little bit so that the video didn't end up being an hour long. So yeah, if you think that I've missed out anything which is particularly important, just let me know in the comments section, and I'm more than willing to discuss it there. With that being said then, let's get on with today's video.
Is atheism a religion?
No.
I've spoken with many atheists who have been frustrated by Christians who say that atheism is a religion.
And that's because that claim has been made ad nauseum until it just frustrates the living hell out of us.
Because, well, atheists want nothing whatsoever to do with religion or belief. They want to distance themselves as much as they can from faith because they want to say that their worldview and their frame in which to understand reality is based on what is accepted as fact, and they don't want to allow anything that sounds like belief or faith or religion into their worldview.
Well, that isn't strictly true. There's plenty of things which people, atheists, may believe which haven't been established as fact. For example, I do believe that there's life elsewhere in the universe. This hasn't been proven, but it seems at least very probable. So I can believe that without there being any proof. And furthermore, atheism is only in regard to a belief in God. It says nothing about what someone believes about anything else.
An atheist would respond by saying that atheism is to religion as not collecting stamps is to stamp collecting. It's not a hobby to not collect stamps, and it's not a religion to not have a religion.
I really couldn't have said it better myself, but I am wondering then, if you think that atheism is not a religion, what is your definition of non-religion?
Or to not have a belief in God. Now, a question I would like to ask is this: are all beliefs religious in nature?
No.
Allow me to give a few beliefs that one could possibly hold that I don't think would be religious in nature. I believe that my favorite hockey team is going to win the hockey game. Notice I didn't mention God or the Bible, just a hockey game. Is that religious in nature? So again, we're going to have to be very careful with how we define religious belief as opposed to any other belief. Now, if you say no, even believing that a hockey game, that someone winning a hockey game is going to happen, that is a religious belief in the sense that, well, you don't know. And if you don't know something and you believe it, that's a religious belief. So yes, a religious belief can even be a hockey game, regarding a hockey game. It doesn't have to do with God, if one wants to use that definition. So if that is your definition of religious belief, is to believe something for which you don't actually know with absolute certainty, then under that definition, I would say atheism is absolutely a religious belief.
Firstly, atheism is not a positive claim, so unfortunately you are wrong there. And secondly, even if atheism was a positive claim, using such a definition is so wide that it would basically render the word religion to be absolutely meaningless.
Allow me to argue for that. Let's take a look at these two sentences, which look very much the same, but are actually very different. Now, at first hearing, those might sound like they're saying exactly the same thing. But if we replace God with something else, we'll see that these are actually very different. Now, it's not hard to imagine someone saying, I do not believe that my mother is at the store. If I was to say, I do not believe that my mother is at the store, That doesn't mean that I'm not open to the possibility that she actually might be. It just means I don't presently have the affirming belief such that I'm convinced that she is there. But, at the same time, I'm not entirely convinced that she isn't. I just don't presently believe that she is. Now think how different the statement, I do not believe my mother is at the store, is from this, I believe my mother is not at the store. Now I'm affirming the negative. I'm saying my conviction is that she's not there. That is entirely different from saying, I do not believe that she is there. And so we have two kinds of atheists. We have the one that says, I believe that God does not exist, and the atheist who says, I do not believe that God exists.
That's true, and nearly every single atheist I know falls into the first category of, I do not believe that God exists.
Now the atheist who says, I do not have the belief, remember, they want to say that atheism is not a belief, so they have to be of the first kind. They have to be the one that says, I do not believe that God exists, which means they have to be open to the possibility. Which means they're no longer an atheist, they're now an agnostic.
Sorry, no, the person in the first category is still very much an atheist. Atheism and theism talk about what someone believes or doesn't believe. Gnosticism and agnosticism refer to what someone knows or doesn't know. Most atheists fall into the category of agnostic atheists, meaning that they do not believe that God exists, but they don't claim to know this for a fact. You could also be a Gnostic atheist, someone who claims to know that God doesn't exist, which is the second category. You could also be an agnostic theist, or a Gnostic theist. However, I never, ever, ever hear the claim that a theist is an agnostic when they say that they believe in God, but accept the fact that they could be wrong.
The person of the second type who says, I believe that God does not exist, that's a religious belief.
I still don't call that a religious belief, and I will be getting into that later in the video. But I'm going to use this now as an opportunity to explain my position. When it comes to a theistic God, as that's a God which takes special interest in human beings, made the earth especially for us, and you know, all of that kind of stuff where God actively intervenes and creates things and stuff all the time. Such a God I do not believe in, and I'm near certain on that. From everything I've learnt about science and how the world works, it seems that there is just absolutely zero evidence that such a God exists, and furthermore, the universe as we see it is completely the opposite of what you would expect if this was the case. However, when it comes to a deistic God, basically a God who created the Big Bang and then disappeared, didn't really do much else, then I do not believe in that. I do not believe in that God, but I could well be wrong. There's no way I can even put a probability statement on there. I just don't believe in him, but I could be wrong.
And so the conclusion is inescapable. You're either an agnostic or a religious atheist. You believe that there is no God, and if you're not comfortable with that, you're going to have to switch over to the agnostic position and say, well, I do not believe that God exists. That would be an agnostic position.
No, as explained, that is an agnostic atheist position.
You're open to the possibility. But you see, the leading atheists here on YouTube would never want you to be that. They would want you to be the kind that says, I believe that God does not exist.
No, I'm sorry, you're wrong. There's not a single leading atheist that I know of, including Richard Dawkins, which takes atheism as a claim of certainty. They will all say that if the right evidence presented itself, they would end up believing in God, which is a lot more than I can say for quite a considerable number of theists. I've met plenty of theists who have said that there's absolutely zero evidence, zero future evidence which would convince them that God is not real.
When they're asked questions like, well, what created the universe? They'll respond by saying, well, I don't know. But I believe that it wasn't God, and they're committed to that idea every bit as the Christian is committed to the idea that God does exist.
I don't know which atheists you've been speaking to, but if someone asked me what caused the Big Bang, and they were a theist, and that was the, and that the idea that God did it was the idea they were trying to present to me, I would simply say, I don't know, but there's no evidence to suggest that it was God.
They're both religious beliefs. And the atheist betrays himself when they vehemently oppose anyone believing that perhaps God did create the universe, because their commitment to the belief that God didn't create the universe is every bit as much of a belief as the alternative.
I can't speak for all atheists, but I don't oppose the idea that God created the universe. What I oppose is it being presented as a fact that God created the universe, when there's absolutely zero evidence to this.
So why are they so committed to opposing, well, the existence of God? Maybe it's because what the Bible says is true, that they hate Him. They know He exists, they hate Him, and they want nothing to do with Him. Oh, and if you believe in God, they'll hate you too, just like Jesus said.
That is simply not true, and I don't believe for 1 second that that is your actual position on it. I don't think you believe that about atheists at all. As I said, we don't oppose the idea that God exists. We oppose it being presented as a fact when there's no evidence, or very, very bad and flawed evidence, to support this. Furthermore, I oppose all of the very, very bad aspects which come along with religion, such as homophobia, sexism, threats of hell, bigotry, superstition being taught instead of real education, and countless more things. It's not the idea of God which we oppose, it's all of the other nonsense which comes along with it, which causes real harm in the world.
It's a religious belief, because to say, I believe that God does not exist, is a belief. End of story. And so it all comes down to your definition of a religious belief. If believing that someone is going to win a hockey game is a religious belief, then believing that there is no God is equally a religious belief.
Okay, if that team which you thought was going to win had won their last 100 games in a row, and they were playing against a team which had had a very, very bad track record, they'd lost their last 100 games, then I would say that, that is a belief based on evidence. It would be a prediction. If, however, it was the other way round, the team you thought was going to win had lost their last 100 games, but you thought they were going to win because they were your favourite team, then that would be a very much faith-based belief, and that would be very comparable to religion, but still, it's not a religious belief. And, of course, secondly, atheism is not necessarily a positive claim, and most of the time is not.
Now, if you want to say that, well, winning a hockey game isn't, regardless if you believe it or not, that's not a religious concern. We wouldn't classify that as religious. Religion has to do with theism. It has to do with belief in God or gods, deities of that nature. Even under that definition, the non-belief in a deity is theistic in nature, because you're doing theology when you're affirming or denying theological claims.
Some theological claims, yes, I wholeheartedly reject them, such as the Genesis account, and that's not based on faith. That's based on evidence, and the evidence which is available completely conflicts with the Genesis account, and therefore I don't believe it because it has been disproven. However, other theological claims, such as the claim that God exists, for example, simply hasn't met its burden of proof, and that's why I don't believe it. To take a non-religious example, supposing I work for a pharmaceutical company, and I create a new drug. If I was to make the claim that it reduces the risk of colon cancer by 35%, without having evidence to support this, people are going to say, well, the scientific community will simply say it hasn't met its burden of proof. They're not saying that it doesn't do that, but it would be very, very unwise to simply assume that it did do that. So no, a lot of theological claims I'm not rejecting, I'm simply saying that they have not met their burden of proof.
To say God exists, or to say God does not exist, is a theological statement. And so it's within the realm of theology, and therefore, atheism is, in a strange sort of way, a theistic belief.
If I was to fill out a form which said, what type of hat are you wearing? And there was a box which said, no hat. That doesn't mean that no hat is a type of hat. It's simply the absence of a hat. So the absence of a theistic belief is not a type of theistic belief. It's simply the absence of a theistic belief.
Although it's atheistic, and thus meant to be the counterpoint to theism, by very definition of its engagement with theism, it's actually a category within the discourse.
Being naked may well be a category in the question, what are you wearing? That doesn't mean naked is a type of clothes.
With that being said, there's also one final concern. I know this video has probably upset a lot of people, and that's good. And that's really good, because atheism is absolutely a religious belief. It's absolutely a religious belief, because even within atheism, if we want to use a strict atheist definition of religion, because, well, I'm a Christian, so this whole video has been from a Christian perspective, let's grant the atheist their position. To an atheist, there's no God, supposedly. There's no soul. There's no immaterial, spiritual, none of that sort of stuff. So everything is material.
Granted, most atheists, especially the well-known ones, don't believe in anything such as ghosts, spirit, afterlife, or anything people would consider supernatural and part of spirituality. That is not something which is necessarily intrinsic of atheism. An atheist is simply somebody who doesn't believe in any god or gods. You can still call yourself an atheist and be well within your rights to believe in ghosts, an afterlife, a soul, any of that stuff. It's not something which is necessarily intrinsic of atheism.
Now, if everything's material, then that's my cat. If everything is material, well then, that means all your thinking, the brain, well, that's just material too. So the chemicals in someone's brain that makes them affirm the existence of God, well, how are they very different from those chemicals which make them deny the very same concept? I mean, both conceptualize God the same way, supposedly, in order for one to affirm it and deny it. If we're not talking about the same thing, if we're not talking about the same concept of God, then how can we say that one's denying of God is the same as the other's affirming? They're both engaging with the same matter. They're both using a similar brain. They're both engaging with the same concept, which I imagine goes on in the same region of the brain. And the difference between affirming or denying a particular concept, well, it's really not that big of a difference.
Yes, it's very important that we are both that we're affirming or denying the same thing, especially when it comes to something like debate. I wouldn't, for example, want to be in a debate where I'm trying to convince someone that a bearded man floating through the sky doesn't exist, when their concept of God is a metaphysical being. And that is for the theist to clarify. They're the one making the claim that a God exists. And it's their responsibility to inform the atheist in a debate what it is that they actually believe in. But as of yet, any concept of a God which a theist has presented to me, I simply don't believe in.
If I believe that there is a bottle of water in front of me, and another person does not believe that there's a bottle of water in front of them, well, both have the concept of the bottle of water, and there's just a slight difference. One affirms and one denies. And it's very easy to see that you could switch from going from denying to affirming very quickly. Observe. I do not presently believe that there's a ping-pong paddle in front of me. Now I do.
And of course, if evidence that clear-cut and strong was presented for the existence of God, I would have to believe in God. There'd be no two ways about it. However, there's, when it comes to theists, I know a lot of theists who have very plainly stated that there's absolutely nothing they could imagine which could possibly ever convince them that God or Jesus didn't exist.
The difference between my two brain states really wasn't that big of a difference. One just affirmed and the other denied. But unless at both points I understood what a ping-pong paddle was, neither the affirmation or the denying would be said to be an affirmation or denying of a ping-pong paddle. So to believe in God or to not believe in God both require an understanding and a concept of God in order to do the affirming or the denying. And within an atheist worldview, the material brain, which affirms and denies the existence of God, both has the concept of God in order to affirm and deny it. And so the affirmation or denying of God, if one was to say that the affirming of God is a religious brain reaction, then the denying of God would equally be so.
But if you had two people in a room with no paddle in front of their face and one person saw a paddle and the other person didn't, one of the people, at least in this respect, their brain would be functioning perfectly normal, and the other person's brain would be functioning abnormally. There would be a very big difference between the two people's brain states because one person would be hallucinating and the other person wasn't. Now let's suppose one of those people was blind and there really was a paddle in front of his face, and the other guy tries to convince him that the paddle is real. The blind person is under absolutely zero obligation to believe the other guy without the other guy actually presenting some evidence. And that's basically what it is with atheism and theism. You're the one who's making the claim that something exists. It's your job to prove that that's the case.
A true atheist within an atheist worldview would have no concept of God whatsoever and neither be able to affirm or deny it. They wouldn't even know what God was. But the fact is, we all know what God is. Because, well, even Helen Keller, who was born deaf, blind, and mute, when she learned to communicate and started talking about God, she said that she had always believed in God even before anyone had communicated the idea to her or she was even able to communicate. It's intrinsically part of us to know God, just as the Bible says, and to deny God's existence is a religious belief.
So us atheists certainly do have a concept of God from what's been presented to us by theists, or the concept we grew up with, or the concept we used to believe in. Now that doesn't necessarily make it true. There certainly are tribes which have absolutely no concept of God. The Helen Keller example you brought up, I haven't heard this myself, but it seems like it's plausible to me, because I do think that we do have a natural tendency to believe in God or the supernatural. However, that doesn't make it true. So, superstitious behaviours, for example, we actively engage in them, even though they're complete nonsense. We see, we hallucinate, you can see an optical illusion, which isn't real, because our brains aren't perfect. Now, so why would we have an inbuilt God concept? Well, I think that our brains are naturally work in a way so that we see motive and purpose in things, and occasionally this can go overboard. So, for example, people used to believe that lightning, diseases, earthquakes, and all sorts of other things were directly controlled by gods. However, we now know this to be completely false. And it makes sense for us, our brains, to be a little bit oversensitive sometimes. So, for example, someone might accidentally stumble and push you over. Now, it makes sense that our brains might read extra motive which isn't there and assume they did it on purpose, because having that little level of paranoia can actually be helpful to our survival, because it would mean that it could prevent us from actually being pushed by someone who actually does have a real motive there, or hurt even more badly. So no, it's not a religious thing to not believe in God, because historically religion has been wrong about pretty much everything. Lightning, hurricanes, floods, diseases, famines, all sorts of things which people used to think were caused by God, we now have completely natural explanations for. And even the things which some theists are clinging on to today, such as denying the Big Bang and denying evolution. We know that the Big Bang happened, and we know that evolution is happening. So, yeah, historically, religion has been wrong about absolutely everything, and there's no reason to believe it.
Oh, and one more thing. What is an atheist's definition of religion from an atheist worldview? Since there is no spiritual reality to them, religion socially speaking, is just a gathering of a bunch of people who mentally assent to a particular idea, who have particular people in authority and have particular books which are authoritative. Now, atheism is exactly that. It's a group of people who identify them with a particular label. They gather on occasion. They have particular teachers and leaders that they look up to. They have particular documents that they find authoritative.
Yes, there are lots of documents and lots of atheist thinkers which I do find authoritative to some degree, because they have good ideas and they present them well. I'm under absolutely no obligation to believe them dogmatically, and I have disagreed with Dawkins and Hitchens and pretty much any atheist you could imagine on a number of different topics. The Origin of Species is a very good book, and it was excellent at its time. However, it's we're not dogmatically believing it, and the Origin of the Species was wrong about a number of things, but the theory itself still holds. So yeah, I'm not under any obligation to believe everything they say, and if Dawkins wrote there was a 500-metre long purple fire-breathing dragon at the centre of the Earth, I would say, no, you're full of shit unless you can prove it's true. Furthermore, things which you might call atheistic science, like the evolution and the Big Bang, are not. There's lots of Christians who accept those to be true because they've seen the evidence and they're not stupid enough to reject the evidence which is right in front of them. Furthermore, you're saying about how, from an atheist perspective, then we can't say religion is anything to do with the supernatural because we don't believe in it. Well, no, sorry, you're wrong. We have your concepts of the supernatural. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, we have to be on the same page about defining God, but when it comes to defining religion, then, it's different for you atheists because you don't believe in the supernatural. No, you can't. You simply can't have it both ways, and we do have definitions for religion. So from dictionary.com, first religion, a set of beliefs concerning the cause, nature and purpose of the universe, especially when considering the creation of a superhuman agency or agencies, usually involving devotional or ritual observances and often containing a moral code governing conduct of human affairs. Well, atheism doesn't say anything about the purpose of the universe. It doesn't even say anything about the cause of the universe. Atheism itself says absolutely nothing, and the theory of the Big Bang is secular. Atheism says in itself nothing about morality. It definitely doesn't say anything about superhuman agencies. There's no rituals. Another definition is a specific fundamental set of beliefs. Well, with atheism, there is just the one thing which you need, and that's to not believe in God. Everything else is irrelevant. Practices generally agreed upon by a number of persons or sects. Christian religion, the Buddhist religion, for example. Third definition, a body of persons adhering to a particular set of beliefs and practices. Well, no practices with atheism, it's just the one thing, not believing in God. And that's it. So no, under those definitions, atheism does not fit the criteria for being a religion.
Sociologically, atheism is a religion. If it wasn't, you wouldn't call yourself an atheist. It would not be anything.
The only reason the word atheist actually exists is because theists are the majority, and historically, theists have been a massive majority. The only reason the word vegetarian exists is because people eat meat. The only reason the word naked exists is because people wear clothes. We don't have a word for people who don't eat other people because cannibalism is not the norm. That's why the word atheist exists. We need a label because atheists historically have been a massive minority. So that if someone says, what's your religion? We can just say atheist, rather than saying, I don't have a religion. It's to speed things up. Do you understand?
a religion even from an atheistic view. Because from an atheistic view, there is no difference between a religion and non-religion because there's no spiritual reality. Religion is just a sociological behavior of a gathering of people mentally assenting to certain ideas. And that is exactly what atheists do. It's exactly what atheists do. Atheism is a religion even from an atheistic definition.
Well, no, as I said before, we have to use the same words, we have to use the same definitions, or it makes language pointless. And us atheists are using your definitions of religion. You know, you're making claims about the supernatural, about the world having purpose, about superhuman entities and that kind of thing, afterlives. We are using your definitions. So that's why we have the words. Atheism doesn't have anything of that. And atheism in and of itself only makes the single statement, and that is, I don't believe in God. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, comment, rate, subscribe, send video responses, especially from you Venomfangx. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye.